Anthony Williams, October 13, 1970, is an Australian convicted hitman, drug trafficker, and drug manufacturer from Melbourne. Victoria. Williams is currently serving a life prison sentence with a non-parole period of 35 years for the murders of 4 victims of the Melbourne gangland killings. He is currently in the maximum security unit of HM Prison Barwon. Carl Williams is divorced from Roberta Mercier, born 1969, and they have 1 daughter. Lead up to the Gangland War. On October 13, 1999, Williams was alleged to have been shot in the abdomen on his 29th birthday by Jason Moran during an argument in Gladstone Park. This event gave rise to a lengthy, violent turf war known popularly as the Melbourne gangland killings. Arrest and confession. February 28, 2007. The 36-year-old Williams pleaded guilty in the Victorian Supreme Court to the murders of Louis Moran, his son Jason Moran, and Mark Malia, whose name was initially suppressed by the court. Williams also pleaded guilty to conspiracy to murder gangland rival Mario Condello. A suppression order prevented the media from reporting this until the day of sentencing. Under a deal with police, Williams was not charged for his alleged involvement in orchestrating the murder of Mark Moran, Jason Moran's half-brother. Jason Moran and associate Pasquale Barbaro were shot dead sitting in a car watching a children's football clinic in Essendon in June 2003. The location of the shooting was reported to be behind the Cross Keys Hotel in Strathmore, Victoria. Louis Moran was shot dead in the inner-city Brunswick Club on March 31, 2004. It was also revealed that Williams is currently serving a sentence of 21 years for the 2003 murder of Michael Marshall. Marshall was shot outside his South Yarra home in front of his 5-year-old son on October 25, 2003. The outcome of this trial had been previously suppressed. Sentencing in May 7, 2007. Williams was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 35 years for the murder of 3 underworld rivals, Jason Moran, Louis Moran, and Mark Malia, and a failed conspiracy to kill Mario Condello. Williams will be 71 before he is eligible for parole. Media adjutant Grantley portrayed Carl Williams in 2008 in Underbelly, a TV series on Channel 9 in Australia. The series was loosely based on the events surrounding the Melbourne gangland wars from 1995 to 2004. On May 14, 2008, the Melbourne Herald-Sun reported that Carl Williams was operating a Facebook page with the assistance of his ex-wife, Roberta Williams. Other media outlets widely duplicated this. His active Facebook friends went from approximately 1,000 on May 8 to 2,500 by midnight, the 8th of May 14. As of May 15, 2008, Carl's Facebook accounts have been removed. Other media outlets now indicate that associates Tony Mockbull and Mick Gatto have accounts that attract a growing fan base. Williams' new Williamsic profile was up and running minutes after being disabled. As of May 19, 19, profile boasted over 3,000 friends. His MySpace, while his also has around 500 friends. Carl Anthony Williams, October 13, 1970, April 19, 2010, was a convicted murderer and drug trafficker from the Australian state of Victoria. He was the central figure in the Melbourne gangland killings. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 35 years for ordering the murders of 3 people and conspiracy to murder a 4th, which was unsuccessful. On April 19, 2010, while incarcerated at Barwon Prison, Williams was beaten to death with part of an exercise bike by another inmate. Williams enlisted the help of others, willing to perform the contract killings in exchange for large payments of cash. At the time of his death, he was in the maximum security Acacia unit of HM Prison Barwon near Geelong. Williams would have been 71. Before he was eligible for parole early life, Williams attended Broadmeadows West Technical School. Leaving in year 11, Williams spent much of his childhood in western Melbourne with his friends and older brother Shane, who died of a drug overdose in 1997. He was married to convicted drug trafficker Roberta Williams, born March 23, 1969, with whom he had 1 child, born March 10, 2001. Williams worked various jobs before opening a children's clothing store, in partnership with his wife, eventually failing. Williams' mother, Barbara, was found dead in her Melbourne home on November 22, 2008. had been suffering from depression. On November 25, 1999, Williams, along with his father, George, and another associate, was arrested and charged with drug trafficking after a raid on a Broadmeadows illegal drug factory. Police seized more than 250,000 amphetamine tablets estimated to be worth up to $20 million. Williams, who described himself as a semi-professional gambler, was banned from the Crown Casino complex on April 2, 2004 by Police Commissioner Christine Nixon under the Casino Control Act. Melbourne gangland killings in October 13, 1999. Williams was shot in the abdomen by Jason Moran because he owed the Morans thousands of dollars. This event gave rise to a lengthy underworld war known popularly as the Melbourne gangland killings. In 2002, after meeting through a mutual friend, Tony Mockbull, Carl Williams would court the services of the murderer Andrew Veniamin as his right-hand man until late 2003. Mark Moran was shot on June 15, 2000. After arriving at his home in Aberfeldy, Williams was due to stand trial for his murder, but the charge was dropped when he pleaded guilty to other murders. Jason Moran and associate Pasquale Barbaro were shot dead, sitting in Moran's car at a football club in Essendon on June 21, 2003. Williams ordered two associates to carry out the murder. The location of the shooting was reported to be behind the Cross Keys Hotel in Strathmore, Victoria. The murder was witnessed by 6 children aged 6 and under. Mark Malia was an associate of murdered underworld criminal Nick Radev. At 8:05 a.m. on August 18, 2003, a fire was reported in a stormwater drain in Sunshine. Fire brigade members attending to the fire recovered a wheelie bin containing the remains of a charred body inside, later identified as Malia. Michael Marshall was shot outside his luxury South Yarra home in front of his 5-year-old son on October 25th, 2003. Lewis Moran was shot dead in the inner city Brunswick club on March 31st, 2004. Williams pleaded guilty to his murder, arrest, and confession February 28, 2007. Williams pleaded guilty in the Supreme Court of Victoria to the murders of Lewis Moran, his son Jason Moran, and Mark Malia, whose name was initially suppressed by the court. Williams also pleaded guilty to conspiracy to murder gangland rival Mario Condello. A suppression order prevented the media from reporting this until the day of sentencing. Under a deal with police, Williams was not charged for his alleged involvement in orchestrating the murder of Mark Moran, Jason Moran's half-brother. It was also revealed that Williams was serving a sentence of 21 years for the 2003 murder of Michael Marshall. The outcome of this trial had previously been suppressed. School fees revelation April 19, 2010. News Limited newspapers, including the Herald Sun, revealed that Victoria police are paying $8,000 in school fees for Williams' daughter. The reason for the payment has not been disclosed. Williams' lawyer Rob Sterry said Williams was upset about the story's publication. There was speculation that the police may have agreed to pay the school fees in exchange for information, and that the publication of the story may have led to Williams' death. The Herald Sun has defended its publication of the story. Death in April 19, 2010. Williams died from a head injury while incarcerated at Barwon Prison. It is alleged that he was struck with part of an exercise bike by another inmate, Matthew Charles Johnson, who has since been charged with murder. Williams' funeral was held on April 30, 2010 at St. Teresa's Catholic Church in Essendon. In January 2011, it was reported that Williams' resting place had still not received a headstone and consisted of a nameless plot. Wikipedia.org crunch. Time for Williams. John Sylvester, May 7 to 07. Sierra L. Williams spent years successfully avoiding an assassin's bullet, only to slowly commit legal suicide in a series of bizarre courtroom acts. It will culminate today when he is sentenced in a specially secured Supreme Court by Justice Betty King. The baby-faced killer turned his back on a sweet legal deal after ignoring his lawyer's advice to shut up in court and at least pretend to be sorry for launching a bloody vendetta that cost more than a dozen lives. Williams agreed to plead guilty to the murders of Mark Malia, August 2003, Jason Moran, June 2003, and Lewis Moran, March 2004. He had previously been found guilty of the murder of Michael Marshall. who was shot dead outside his Toorak home in October 2003, died in agreeing to plead guilty. Williams cut a deal that meant he got away with murder. Police say he killed Mark Moran, June 2000, and was involved in the murders of Willie Thompson, July 2003, Nick Radov, April 2003, and Victor Pierce, May 2002. He was directly responsible for the death of Pasquale Barbaro, who was accidentally shot dead by one of Williams' hitmen while murdering Jason Moran. Williams is also suspected of ordering the murder of Graham Kennyberg, who was shot dead outside his Kew home in December 2003, and being connected with several more gangland killings, paranoid, frightened, and self-deluded. The man who called himself the Premier, because I run this F-ing state, was stopped only when arrested by the Piranha Gangland Task Force in May 2004. He survived and prospered by surrounding himself with a gang of soldiers whose loyalty he won, with a combination of drugs, money, power, and women. But once inside, key men wavered. Williams forgot to look after some of his men, leaving one hitman to battle through a murder trial on legal aid. While the Queen's Counsel defended him, they broke the code of silence and became prosecution witnesses one by one. Key members of the Williams camp crossed the floor, leaving the Premier without the numbers needed to survive. So why? Then did the prosecution accept a plea and make a deal with the multiple killers? Why didn't they convict him again and again for the murders he committed? Because it would have taken up to 10 years and cost millions of dollars. It would also have given Williams the public platform and the media attention he craves. By locking him away, they condemn him to, as he has declared himself, a life of Groundhog Day. Williams said he might be prepared to deal as early as November last year. He implied he had information that could help crack the murders of police informer Terrence Hodson and his wife Christine, who were shot dead in their Kew home in May 2004. Detectives believe rogue police were responsible for the double murder, so if Williams could have provided information, he would have been able to demand a savage discount on his sentence, but he was teasing. If Williams knew anything about the double murder, he wasn't talking. Before agreeing to plead guilty, Williams sent his now estranged wife, Roberta, to see Mick Gatto, a man he once wanted to kill. Gatto was a friend of the Morans, and Williams always feared the former heavyweight boxer would launch a savage counterattack. Gatto shot dead one of Williams' gunmen, Andrew Feniaman, in a Carlton restaurant in March 2004. He was acquitted on the grounds of self-defense. Roberta Williams told Gatto her husband was on the verge of cutting a deal but would not talk to police about the Carlton identity. Gatto told her he didn't care as he had nothing to hide. During the long pretrial process before Williams was due to face the court for murdering Jason Moran and Pasquale Barbaro, his lawyers asked Justice King if he pleaded guilty, would the sentence be crushing? While no promises were made, they were told Williams could expect to see some light at the end of the tunnel. Justice King discussed hard legal precedent. The former hard-hitting prosecutor and senior member of the National Crime Authority was well aware of the case law surrounding guilty pleas. Paul Charles Denier is a serial killer who stalked and murdered 3 women in Frankston in 1993. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life with no minimum by Supreme Court Justice Frank Vincent. But on appeal, he was given a minimum of 30 years because he should receive a discount because of his guilty plea. Leslie Alfred Camilleri, who killed Topeka schoolgirls in 1997, pleaded not guilty and was given life with no minimum. His partner, Lindsay Honey Beckett, pleaded guilty and received a minimum of 35 years. Justice King knew that if Williams pleaded guilty, she would be required to set a minimum sentence. The maximum of life was never in doubt. Williams said he wanted a sentence that would give him some chance of getting out by 70. Piranha Police said they would push for a lighter sentence if he were prepared to become a witness in subsequent trials. They wanted him to turn on his former role model, multimillionaire drug boss Tony Mockbull, who fled Australia in March last year. Mockbull paid Williams to organize murders, including the hit on Michael Marshall. While the case against Mockbull is compelling, Williams' testimony would make it bulletproof. While Williams may be many things, he remains an old-school crook who believes in the code of silence. Paul Underworld War began when he was shot in the stomach by half-brothers Mark and Jason Moran in 1999. Even back then, he refused to tell police who shot him after he decided to plead guilty. He made one statement to detectives. It is a self-serving, rambling document that talks of corruption with few facts and has been judged to have no evidentiary value. So, Williams's negotiating position was weakened without a promise to become a Crown witness. The final deal struck was that prosecutors would not demand a crushing sentence and would not oppose a move for Williams' father, George, to receive a suspended sentence for pending drug charges. In effect, Justice King was left to decide sentencing, without the prosecution lobbying for the most extended jail term possible. When Williams finally agreed to the deal on February 28th, just days before the jury was selected, the prison van taking him back to jail was called back so the papers could be signed, and the plea formally entered before he changed his mind again. The minutes before the court was convened, his mother, Barbara, urged him to abandon the deal and take his chances before a jury with the open and shut case against him. It was virtually sure he would have been convicted and given life with no minimum once he pleaded. The rest should have been easy. He was to attend court for a public showing of mea culpa. He was to sit behind glass with a sad face and cow eyes as his lawyers said he was sorry. They would say he thought the Moran family were out to kill him, that he would leave jail as an older man and would miss seeing his daughter Dakota grow into an adult, and that he should receive a hefty discount because of his remorse, however, against legal advice. Carl Williams insisted on giving evidence. For about an hour he gave ridiculous evidence contradicting known facts. He denied ever being paid money for the marshal hit by Mockbull, and tried to discredit Crown witnesses who would give evidence against some of his mates. This meant prosecutor Jeff Horgan, SC, had to tear strips off Williams in a 90-minute cross-examination to protect the integrity of future Crown cases. Indeed, Justice King questioned whether Williams was remorseful for his actions. Williams left the court smiling, his lawyers weren't, but the confessed killer was fully aware that his 2 hours in the sun would probably cost him years in a dark cell. He told friends later he was proud of his performance. He will serve his sentence with prisoners who will know he didn't do anyone to save himself. Williams is not a stupid man. A psychiatric report declares him of high average intelligence. He does not have a mental illness. The report declares him to be broadly standard. But he is a man who loved being a gangster. He plotted revenge against the Morans after he was shot, and then felt he had to keep killing anyone connected with them to remain alive. It was always going to end with him dead or in jail. For most of his life, one person likely to attend today's sentencing will be Judy Moran, whose estranged husband Louis and sons Jason and Mark were killed either by or on the orders of Carl Williams. Has been calling for an indefinite sentence for Williams and the reintroduction of the death penalty. Mrs. Moran fails to mention the underworld war was started when her drug-dealing son shot Williams in 1999. She also failed to lobby for capital punishment when Jason Moran was accused of the 1998 murder of gangster Alphonse Gangitano. Also present will be many members of the Piranha Task Force, men and women who politicians and media commentators repeatedly told that they would never solve the gangland murders because they would not break the code of silence. Williams' loyal parents Barbara and George, who often wear his favorite brown moccasins to court, are expected to attend. They have stood by their son through his many court dates. So word for Williams, after the excitement of the sentencing, he will return to the maximum security Acacia unit in Barwon Prison, where he socializes with a few loyal henchmen. He will be interested to see how he is portrayed in a 13-part docudrama to be filmed later. This year, his role has yet to be cast, although actor Shane Jacobson, star of the movie Kenny, has been mentioned as a likely candidate. The minimum sentence will help prison officers control him. If he misbehaves in jail, his eventual parole will be threatened, leaving him facing life in jail. Prison officers say indefinite sentences destroy inmates because the dream of release is taken from them. Eventually, when threats die down, Williams will be transferred to the mainstream, and if he behaves, he will move to a more comfortable jail, but he will always be a name. As he gets older and physically weaker, he will become a target. Even the most brutal long-term inmates end up being at risk of being bashed or stabbed. Sometime in the future, a violent young offender may attack him just for the bragging rights. As the years pass, he will become institutionalized. His wife, Berta will have moved on, his parents will have passed away, his daughter has grown up, and the glamorous blonde Renata Loreno, who pops into jail to visit him, may have moved on. Carl Williams may have got away with murder, but there is one thing no one can beat: time. It eventually wounds all heels.the.h.com.o Williams. In a parting shot at the judge in Harrison, May 7, 2007, minimum 35-year jail term, maximum term of life imprisonment. Due for release in 2042 at the earliest notorious underworld killer. Carl Williams today lambasted from the dock the judge who jailed him for 35 years, for what she called the cowardly murder of 3 rivals in Melbourne's bloody gangland war. Justice Betty King handed down the sentence in a special sitting of the Supreme Court at Melbourne's County Court, the baby-faced killer Williams appearing to smirk when the 35-year minimum term was announced. As the court adjourned, Williams said, "I have something to say." Holding a clipboard, he told Justice King, "I expected nothing better of you. You are not a judge. You are only a puppet of the police. You are a puppet for Piranha." Justice King then asked for Williams to be removed, at which point he yelled, "Get F asterisk 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 get." Williams' mother, Barbara, then repeated his claims to the court. "You're not a judge. You don't deserve your wig and gown." Mrs. Williams told Justice King as she left the courtroom, "Life behind bars today's sentence means the 36-year-old will be behind bars until 71. Justice King said life imprisonment was the only appropriate penalty. In February, Williams pleaded guilty to the murders of Mark Malia, August 2003, Jason Moran, June 2003, and Louis Moran, March 2004. He had previously been found guilty of the murder of Michael Marshall, who was shot dead outside his Toorak home. In October 2003, the murders occurred at the height of Melbourne's notorious gangland, war that raged between 1998 and 2006, leaving 27 dead. Not a hero, Justice King said there are no other appropriate penalties for crimes of this nature. Gangland executions carried out on the streets of Melbourne, in the presence of frightened men, women, and children. She noted that Williams appeared to enjoy his notoriety, giving interviews and making statements outside court. Justice King expressed concern that he would become a hero to some community members. "You are not," she said. "You are a killer and a cowardly one who employed others to do the actual killing, whilst you hid behind carefully constructed alibis. You should not be the subject of admiration by any community member," Puppet Master said. He arranged for others to do the killing and alibis to protect himself, describing him as a puppet master who decided whether people lived or died. "I find that you are the gang's leader," Justice King told him, adding that he was at the top of the chain of command. Justice King acknowledged that many of Williams' victims were engaged in criminal activity, but said it was just as unacceptable to kill criminals as it was to kill any other person. "You do not get to be judge, jury, and executioner. These were not vigilante killings. They were matters of expediency to you. You acted as though it was your right to have these people killed." She said he was the counselor and procurer of 3 murders, a more heinous role than that of the killer himself. He bore the highest level of criminality. No real remorse, Justice King imposed a life sentence for each of 3 murders, and a 25-year sentence for conspiracy to murder gangland rival Mario Condello. She said his crimes would typically require a sentence of life imprisonment with no minimum term, but he deserved a discount because his guilty plea had saved up to 10 years of the court's time and countless amounts of money. A sentence discount was appropriate to encourage such pleas. Williams had demonstrated no real remorse. She said, "You have uttered words of remorse in response to your counsel's questions, but I find that you have no real or genuine remorse for the victims of your crimes. Only remorse that you have been caught and lost your liberty." Unsatisfactory witness described him as a most unsatisfactory witness, virtually incapable of telling the truth. Justice King said his testimony was designed to provide no evidence against people who were not already dead or convicted. The manner of his giving evidence was arrogant and almost supercilious. "You left me with a strong impression that your view of all these murders was that they were all justifiable and you were the real victim, having been forced to admit at least some of your involvement by the statements of other members of your group who had cooperated with police. Extraordinary killing spree sentencing took nearly 90 minutes. during which Justice King reviewed the offenses individually and summarized each crime. She said the killings engendered fear in the community and created the perception that Victoria had been plunged into a state of lawlessness. Justice King said the 3 murders took place during an extraordinary period in Melbourne's crime history. She said it was a time when an almost unprecedented level of very public murders of known and suspected criminals occurred. Justice King said she would like to publicly acknowledge those involved in the case for coming to a sensible resolution. Guilty. Plea. Williams had earlier pleaded guilty to murdering gangland figure Louis Moran, his son Jason Moran, and another underworld figure, Mark Malia. He is already serving 21 years for the murder of Michael Marshall, who was gunned down outside his South Yarra home in front of his 5-year-old son on October 23rd, 2003. His admissions were a breakthrough in Victoria Police's Piranha Task Force probe into 8 years of bloodletting. Louis Moran, 58, was shot dead in the inner-city Brunswick club on March 31st, 2004. His son Jason, 36, was shot dead as he sat in a car watching a children's football clinic in Essendon in June 2003. Malia's charred corpse was found in a drain in Sunshine in Melbourne's West in August 2003. Outstanding charges under Williams' plea deal. Outstanding charges against him over the murders of Jason Moran's stepbrother, Mark Moran, and Jason's bodyguard, Pasquale Barbaro, will not proceed. In the pre-sentence hearing last week, Williams' barrister, David Ross QC, told the court that a minimum term should be fixed for his client. Ross asked the court to consider Williams' guilty plea, which had saved the courts and community millions of dollars in trial costs. We say there should be a minimum term fixed. Mr. Ross said he should not leave prison in a box. He should be able to walk out at some stage. Single quotes theage.com.o with Selma Milovanovic. AAP. How the Carl Williams story unfolded. It has been almost 8 years since Melbourne's underworld war erupted with gunfire in a suburban park. 1999 October. Brothers Jason and Mark Moran lure Carl Williams to an outer suburban Melbourne park, where Jason shoots Williams in the stomach over a drug debt. 2000 June. Mark Moran, 36, is shot dead outside his Essendon home while sitting in his car. 2003 June. Jason Moran, 36, and his associate Pasquale Barbaro, 40, were shot dead in the front seat of a van while watching a children's football clinic in Essendon. October. Hot dog vendor and kickboxer Michael Marshall was gunned down outside his South Yarra home in front of his 5-year-old son. 2004 August. Williams is charged with the murder of Jason Moran, Pasquale Barbaro, and Michael Marshall. October. Williams is sentenced to 7 years in jail after pleading guilty to drug trafficking charges. His wife, Roberta Williams, was sentenced to a minimum of 6 months in jail after being convicted on a related drugs charge. 2005 January. Williams was charged with 1 count of trafficking a commercial quantity of amphetamines between December 2000 and June 2002, and 6 counts of dealing with the proceeds of crime totaling $46,600 cash. February. Charged with murdering Mark Moran. November. Victorian Supreme Court jury finds Williams guilty of the murder of Michael Marshall. 2006 March. A close Williams ally is sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 23 years after pleading guilty to the murder of Michael Marshall, Jason Moran, and Pasquale Barbaro. He told police he was the gunman in all 3 murders, and Williams asked him to kill Jason Moran as revenge over the 1999 shooting. He said Tony Mockbull asked him and Carl Williams to kill Marshall as revenge for another underworld killing. June. Another close Williams ally pleads guilty to the murder of Jason Moran and indicates to police he is prepared to assist them in Williams' trial and other matters. July. Carl Williams is sentenced to 27 years in jail with a minimum term of 21 years for the murder of Michael Marshall. A few hours later, he is charged with the murder of Mark Malia, whose remains were found in a wheelie bin dumped in a drain at the back of a soccer club in Melbourne's West End. August 2003, 2007, February 26. Carl Williams is charged with the murder of Louis Moran, father to Jason and stepfather to Mark, who was killed in the inner-city Brunswick club on March 31, 2004. February 28th, in a breakthrough in Melbourne's underworld war, Carl Williams pleads guilty to the murder of Jason Moran, Louis Moran, and Mark Malia. The DPP announced other charges against him would not proceed, including the murder of Mark Moran. May 7th, Williams is sentenced to life in jail with a minimum of 35 years before he is eligible for parole.